imagine anything worse than this.
Is that the second building of the World Trade Center going down?
Yes, that is the second. That is the second tower. That is the second tower.
Down. A huge plume of smoke that came out of the middle of the building, and then the building just disappeared in the smoke.
Well, the sun did rise this morning, but it rose on a physically changed New York and a psychically changed America. The nation's sense of security shaken. New York's skyline missing two of its most prominent buildings. The Pentagon seriously damaged. 4 commercial airliners hijacked and used as guided missiles. Yesterday's terrorist attacks on the nation are being called the worst tragedy ever to befall the United States. And this before we have a real sense of the death toll. Estimated to be somewhere in the thousands, but still for practical purposes unknown. We are getting our first sense of how bad things might be. Ferries carted loads of bodies across the Hudson River all night. 3 cab companies ripped seats from their vans to then transport those bodies to the military ocean terminal in Bayonne. And again, there's still no word on the numbers involved. Life in and around New York will remain fairly disrupted this morning, and no doubt for some time to come, especially for those with travel plans. New York City public and parochial schools are closed. There are other closings as well. We'll get to them soon. Right now, though, traffic and transit on the ones, well, we'll delay that now to go to Mayor Giuliani.
From a surrounding area around this perimeter area this morning. We are also going to show you a picture.
Ordered at airports once flights do resume.
All right, we're having some trouble pulling that up, so let's go to traffic and transit on the ones and Pete Torriello.
Lee, all bridges and tunnels coming into Manhattan are going to be closed until further notice. In addition, the Lincoln and the Holland tunnels are shut down in both directions. The Bayonne Bridge, the Goethals Bridge, and the Outer Bridge crossing Staten Island bound are also closed until further notice. The Brooklyn Battery and the Queens Midtown tunnels are also shut down in both directions.
Okay, Pete, we've loaded up the mayor, and we're going to go to him now.
The reality is that we have looks like about 202 firefighters that are still missing, and police officers, both New York City and Port Authority police officers. Of the uniformed personnel, we probably have about 260 people that are unaccounted for, that we're searching for. And of course, we don't know what the death toll will be with regard to the actual building.
But 202 firefighters, you say, and 200, I mean, those numbers just tear your heart.
259 uniformed service members, which would be made up of the New York City Fire Department, the New York City Police Department, and the Port Authority Police Department. The 2 people that we rescued late last night or early in the morning were 2 Port Authority police officers.
So I just want to get that straight. You say 259 uniformed people overall, 202 firefighters. Did you say?
Correct.
That would leave 57 police or Port Authority
police officers and Port Authority police officers.
Oh,
and then of course we're talking about the possibility of thousands of people. We don't know the numbers yet with regard to whoever was unlucky enough, unfortunate enough to have been left in the building when the 2 buildings collapsed.
Can you give me some sense of just the magnanimity of this task?
No, the magnanimity of the task is weeks and weeks of cleanup, which we have to take a day at a time, and we will.
You've got essentially a 5-story or higher pile of rubble where each of those buildings were, right?
Correct, and then smaller ones for the other buildings and the other damage that was done. Other buildings came down. Other buildings were hit and damaged. So we're going to have to take this a day at a time, and I mean, we'll work our way out of this, and the city is going to come out of this stronger and more determined than it ever was before. But we have to understand that we're all going to have very difficult emotions about this and very difficult feelings about it. We worked late into the night organizing the effort for today and tomorrow. And we have tremendous amount of assistance. We actually have more volunteers than we need right now, which is really wonderful. When I was there...
Mr. Mayor, it's Diane Sawyer.
Yeah, Diane.
I just wanted to ask, you mentioned that 2 had been rescued. You were in contact with a 3rd. Can you tell us how you're in contact with that 3rd person?
We're in voice contact with him. The fire and police rescue team is able to talk to him. He's trapped right now. And they're, trying to rescue him, trying to get him out. They're able to talk to him.
You had mentioned before that there had been calls, some cell phone calls. Any other calls?
Yes, there are others.
Still,
there are other reports of calls, and part of part of the difficulty is making sure you put them all together, and you're not talking about the same ones. So they're in different parts of the area, hoping that they're in contact with people. There's only one that I know of that's an actual ongoing rescue effort right now.
I'm curious as to how that person could have survived. Any sense? I mean, is he in some sort of pocket, or
yeah? Yesterday, I visited this firefighter at St. Vincent's Hospital, whose entire company was saved because they were in a void, and they were in the void for 5 hours. And their colleagues are missing, and they believe their colleagues may be dead. But this group of 6 or 7 firefighters were in a void, and therefore they were protected. And when they finally were extricated, they were shocked to find that the whole building had come down because they had been in this protected void. They heard the explosion, they heard everything else, but everything just fell around them. So we're hopeful that there are going to be other situations like this in this mass building collapses, that there'll be areas where there were protected pockets.
Mr. Mayor, you mentioned the 41 fatalities that you know about at this point, and we know this is just the beginning. But I wonder if you can give us any sense of how many people were reported missing overnight. Any sense of that magnitude?
No, I don't have the civilian numbers in terms of reported missing. I don't know how many. I would just be guessing at that number. I know we had 1,700 injuries that we know of people that we took to the hospital, or people that where we accounted for their injuries, anywhere from very serious to minor injuries. So that means 1,700 injuries.
A couple of other
from
reports.
One incident is horrendous, obviously.
Sure. A couple of other reports I wanted to ask you about. One report that ferries were ferrying bodies across the river and across the Hudson River as often as 10 minutes into the night.
You mean? Are you talking about dead bodies?
That's right.
I don't know of that report.
The dead are being taken to the medical examiner's office?
Yes, they're all. Right now, the procedure is that they're all being taken to the medical examiner's office. Medical examiner Hirsch is confident that he can handle at least the original numbers. We have another site in the Bronx and then another site in Manhattan, but right now, as I said, there's only 41 that we can account for.
Mr. Mayor, let me ask you about the conditions of the city of New York. Last night we heard that everything essentially south of 14th Street, and for those people around the country who don't know New York very well, that's an enormous amount of real estate territory, a lot of neighborhoods,
sure,
major neighborhoods.
That area is the third largest business district in the country. Midtown Manhattan is the largest, Chicago, and then the lower Manhattan is the third largest business district in the United States. So that gives you a sense of the scope of it. The scope of it is it's a very, very big area, and probably the financial capital of the world.
And that is going to be closed down to all but emergency vehicles for how long?
That's going to be closed down all day today. We're not going to make a decision until probably this afternoon about tomorrow, again, because we want to take this a day at a time. But the core area where the cleanup is being done, I mean, you're talking in terms of days and weeks that it's going to take to clean that up.
Right.
And we want to do it carefully. There's also the consideration that it's a crime scene, so we want to work under the direction of the police and the FBI to make sure that we retain the evidence that they're going to need to figure out, what happened, and hopefully be able to bring people to justice for this.
And a question about the heightened security in New York, Mr. Mayor. We have reports this morning that the aircraft carrier USS George Washington is now in position off the coast of the city. We also have reports that NORAD, the North American Air Defense Command, has gone on alert and activated F-15, F-16 fighter planes flying combat air patrol over New York. And AWACS planes are now currently up in the air. Just asking you, are there any signs, any warnings that there could be more, that there might be something today?
I checked as of 15 minutes ago, and there are no specific threats of any kind. There is general concern, as there should be, and I appreciate very, very much the personal concern of the President of the United States Navy, all of whom called us yesterday and talked to us. And they're taking special precautions because of what happened yesterday. But there is no specific piece of information. But the people of the city of New York very much appreciate that. Obviously, as they wake up this morning, they're going to be confronting an attack on New York and on the United States in dimensions that we've never experienced before in our history. And
Mayor Giuliani, live on 1010 Wins, actually appearing on what on any other day would be ABC's Good Morning America. And he had some hard numbers for us, some of the first we've had, and they are hard numbers indeed. 259 uniformed service personnel of New York City, that would be firefighters and police, are missing or known dead. Of that number, 202 firefighters, 57 police officers or Port Authority police officers. As for actual known dead, the mayor put that number at 41, but obviously that is going to grow as rescue workers make their way through the rubble. When the mayor came on, we were trying to give you a report of traffic and transit, which is substantially disrupted this morning. Let's pick that up again. Wins News Time 7:11, and here's Pete Torriello.
Lee, the Lincoln, the Holland tunnels are shut down in both directions. The George Washington Bridge, New York bound, is closed. New Jersey bound lower level is closed, but open to New Jersey on the upper deck. The Bayonne Bridge, the Goethals Bridge, and the outer bridge crossing New York bound are closed. The MTA tells us that the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel and the Midtown Tunnel are shut down both ways. The Triborough Bridge has no access to or from Manhattan. Over at the Verrazano Bridge, the Brooklyn-bound upper level is closed, and the lower level is open to the Belt Parkway and Fort Hamilton Parkway traffic only. The southbound Henry Hudson Bridge is closed. In fact, the Henry Hudson Parkway is shut down southbound at 232nd Street. The Brooklyn Bridge is shut down both ways, as is the Manhattan Bridge. Williamsburg Bridge is open going into Brooklyn. The 59th Street Bridge, Manhattan-bound, both levels are closed. The eastbound lower deck is also shut down. You can use the upper level to get into Queens. The Gowanus Expressway is shut down inbound at Fort Hamilton Parkway. Both the Harlem River Drive and the West Side Highway are shut down from 96th Street all the way down to the Battery. A lot of closings in New Jersey, too. Eastbound 3 is closed at 495. You're not going to get to the GWB off of eastbound 446 or the southbound Palisades Parkway, of course. 17, the southbound ramp to Route 80 is also shut down. And coming in from Nassau County, they have closed the westbound LIE, northern and southern parkways at the Queens line. New Jersey Transit, Metro North, Long Island Railroad providing as near to normal service as possible. There is some PATH train service available, and city subways, most service has been resumed, with the exception of the 3, the C, and the Q Express, and all stations in Manhattan from Canal Street south remain closed. Lee?
All right, Pete. Now, as you indicated, there are quite a few closures, and if you are planning a route that involves any of the closed bridges or tunnels, be aware that it could have some rather severe consequences. On the 1010 Wins Newsline with us now is a listener who has been stuck at the Goethals Bridge, you tell us, for approximately 15 hours now. Is that correct?
I've been here since 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon.
And why are they not letting you go one way or the other?
They're letting people in from Staten Island into Jersey, but you cannot cross the bridge to go to Staten Island, and they can't give us a reason why. There's at least 200 or 300 cars sitting here. People have been at the Exxon station. There's nothing to eat. Everybody slept in their cars all night long.
Have any options been given you in terms of getting out of there, like even walking out?
No, you can't walk over the bridge. You can't do anything. They will not let you go through at all.
Okay, sorry to hear that. I hope that clears up soon. And
I hope so, too.
Thanks for calling in, and let that serve as a warning to others who might contemplate a route that involves any of the many closures that we have traffic and transit-wise this morning. Well, we heard from Mayor Giuliani a short time ago. He gave us some of the first hard numbers regarding this tragedy. 259 uniformed service personnel missing, believed dead. 41 people are known dead. That number is going to climb. Rescue efforts continue at this hour. 1010 Wins newsman Al Jones is about as close as they're letting anyone get to the rescue scene. Al?
Yeah, you can walk around the perimeter here as long as you stay back of Chambers Street. That's about as close as they're going to let you get. And really, I'm not sure that too many of us want to get much closer. The surprising thing, I guess, is that the whole time I've been here, very few ambulances leaving the area. There was a 50-year-old man who was pulled out of the rubble not too long ago. He was dazed, banged up quite a bit, but was speaking, was conscious, and was taken to St. Vincent's. But there haven't been that many people taken out of here by ambulance, which means that they're not finding a lot of people that need medical attention. I talked with Dr. David Pryor, who is a trauma surgeon. He came down from the University of Pennsylvania, volunteering his time, and he's been here since yesterday afternoon. And he has treated mostly bruises and bumps. He's a trauma specialist, and he said the frightening thing for him is that outside of the walking wounded, the people who needed treatment and then left, it's been people who are dead. And he goes, there's almost nothing in between. And with so many people that work in that complex and so few people that are being that are coming out of it, or so few people that have been accounted for, it's quite frightening to think at how many people are missing. And you look back on Greenwich Avenue is probably the worst scene. The steel girders that used to form the ceilings for each one of these floors pancaked down. There's 9 or 10 of them sandwiched down where probably there used to be maybe one floor of the building. It's just girder on top of girder with no room in between, and that gives you an idea of how much force there was when this entire building just came down. And that's World Trade Center number 1. That's the one that we can see here from the north side of the complex. But again, the digging for the most part is being done by hand or small machine. The real big equipment kind of hovers on the sides here. It's being used to haul away debris, and there's plenty of it. But very little of the real heavy-duty digging is going on because the hopes are that there are still people inside and they want to take it easy. The firefighters concentrating a lot of their effort over where the pedestrian bridge used to cross West Street. The bridge came down, but they believe there are people buried inside, so that's where a lot of the effort is right now. But again, not a lot of people being pulled out of here, not a lot of ambulances rushing people to the hospital. So hope for many of these people is starting to dwindle, and firefighters, police officers, EMS officials, you can see it in their faces that they really fear the worst, and that we really have not seen that much to give you a lot of hope. Lee?
Okay, Mayor Giuliani indicated that the city did, in fact, have more help than it needed at this point, but that might be more of an indication that there are many thousands of people who are just beyond help at this point. WINS News Time 7:17. The big question this morning is who did it, and investigators are beginning to develop some information on that. 1010 WINS newsman James Faraday has been looking at that angle. James?
Well, Lee, Osama bin Laden finds himself atop the list of suspects in yesterday's audacious terrorist attacks on New York and Washington. U.S. officials are reportedly focusing on the Saudi exile, who's also a suspect in the U.S. embassy bombings. Bin Laden, for his part, denies any involvement in the attacks, but a Pakistani TV report quotes one of his aides as saying the terrorist mastermind thanked Allah for the death and destruction and praised the people who carried out the hijackings and plane crashes. Reaction from around the world has been swift. At the Vatican, Pope John Paul wasted no time in condemning the attacks.
I ask God to grant American people the strength and courage they need at this time of sorrow and trial.
In the Middle East, where Palestinians were seen dancing in the streets to celebrate the attacks, Palestinian spokeswoman Hanan Ashrawi denounced the actions of the terrorists.
I think it's the worst terrorist attack in the history of humanity, and it's a blow to humanity as a whole. It's a crime that is of just absolute immorality and evil.
On Capitol Hill, newsman Vic Ratner says Congress will be in session today.
Open again one day after the terrorist attacks. Congress is likely to pass a resolution condemning those responsible and, as House Speaker Dennis Hastert put it, showing support for the nation's leaders.
We will stand with the president, we will stand with this government, and we will stand as Americans together through this time.
Scores of lawmakers from both parties joined their leaders in an emotional gathering on the steps of the Capitol last night, singing God Bless America.
At the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue, CNN's Kelly Wallace tells us what's happening at the White House.
He will begin his day getting an up-to-date briefing from his national security team on the latest concerning the investigation, as well as the search and rescue efforts. He's also invited a group, bipartisan congressional leaders, over to the White House. And at that time, Mr. Bush will come before the cameras again. His message will be that the U.S. government is doing everything it can to assist in the disaster areas in New York, Pennsylvania, and then, of course, at the Pentagon here in Washington, D.C. He will also say that the work of the government goes on, and again, that the U.S. will do everything possible to find those responsible.
Non-stop coverage of the terrorist attacks on New York and Washington continues with 1010 WINS News anchor Lee Harris.
It's 61 degrees. We have clear skies in New York. It will be going up to a sunny and usually pleasant 78, but this will not be a pleasant day in New York City. About all we can hope is that it was better than yesterday. For the latest news, anytime, anywhere, set a news button on your car radio to 1010 WINS. New York City's most listened to radio station. Jim Maloney is at the editor's desk.
Clearly, we're in the middle of the worst ever act of terrorism directed at the United States on domestic soil.
Oh, my God, the building fell! The South building just crumbled from the top. Oh, my God!
There's no words to describe what's going on out there. I mean, these bodies just coming a half hour later, still coming out of the goddamn sky. Devastating. Devastating.
It's the morning after all that, and New Yorkers who were able to sleep last night, and there likely weren't many, will discover that yesterday's nightmare is not one they can awake from. The city, the nation, the world have been forever changed by yesterday's events, which are being called, probably without any fear of exaggeration, the worst tragedy to ever befall the United States. In summary, the World Trade Center towers are no more, so it is feared the thousands of people who were in those towers when they were hit by commercial airliners, turned into guided missiles at the hands of hijacker terrorists. A similar attack was launched on the Pentagon, also with substantial loss of life. But unlike the World Trade Center, the Pentagon does stand today. It is open for business. There's plenty of business to be conducted there, and we'll get to that in a moment. Right now, WINS News Time 7:21. Time for traffic and transit on the ones with Pete Torriello.
City-bound Hudson and East River bridges and tunnels are all closed until further notice. The Verrazano Bridge, we have the Staten Island bound open on both levels. No tolls charged there, and the Brooklyn bound upper level is also shut down at this time, but the lower deck to Brooklyn is open. And then when you get off the bridge in Brooklyn, you must exit at Fort Hamilton or the Belt Parkway. Those are the only routings available to you off the Verrazano. Staten Island crossings, the Goethals and the Bayonne bridges and the outer bridge crossing are shut down into Staten Island, open to New Jersey, as you heard from one 1010 WINS listener just a short time ago. Many motorists spent the night at the Goethals Bridge, stuck out there for more than 15 hours. All domestic flights leaving Newark, JFK, and LaGuardia, of course, are grounded at least until noon today, at which time the FAA will make some sort of a decision. City subways, the MTA says the 1 and 2 trains are operating from the Bronx down to 34th Street. The number 1 is on local only from Van Cortlandt Park, 242nd Street down to 34th Street. The number 2 is express only down to 34th Street. The 3 line is suspended. The 4s are operating from Woodlawn in the Bronx down to New Lots in Brooklyn, skipping Union Square to Borough Hall. And the number 5 trains are operating Dyer Avenue in the Bronx down to Flatbush Avenue, but skipping Union Square and Borough Hall. The number 6 is operating only as far as Bleecker Street. City parking regulations are suspended until further notice, and we'll have more shadow traffic coming up very shortly here on 1010 Wednesday.
All right, Pete, as we've been mentioning over the last 22 hours or so, ever since this tragedy began to unfold, we still have no really clear sense of the loss of life, other than that it is clearly enormous. Mayor Giuliani did give us some hard numbers about 15, 20 minutes ago. He says there are 259 uniformed service personnel missing or dead, among them 202 firefighters. And as for actual dead, 41 known dead. Ferries were taking bodies across the river all night. We have a report of that, although the mayor claimed not to be aware of it. And, of course, he has a lot of things to stay up with, so it's conceivable that not everything has crossed his desk. One disturbing bit of information comes from St. Vincent's Hospital, where initially they were flooded with wounded and walking wounded. 1010 WINS newsman John Montone is there, and lately they haven't taken anyone in, John. Is that correct?
Not since last night, Lee, and actually it's the worst possible situation here, and that is quiet. Almost nothing happening. The triage units stand at the ready inside and outside of the hospital. 3 times as many doctors and nurses are here. They are waiting, hoping for people to be pulled out of the rubble of the World Trade Center. But the truth is that since last night, there have been no new patients. St. Vincent's executive Mark Ackerman addressed us a few moments ago, and he expressed the hope, but in very realistic terms, that this place would soon be abuzz with activity.
We are ready for what we hope will be additional survivors today. We are the closest trauma center, and thus if there are any miraculous recoveries from the wreckage, they will most likely be brought here.
A trauma room doctor told me that by using Oklahoma City as an example, 24 hours after the bomb blast went off, there were some victims rescued. So they are hoping against hope, as we all are hoping, that that is the case today, that they will find some of those people who are buried beneath the rubble, that some of them will be alive, that they can be brought here, and that they can be saved. Another issue addressed by the doctor, the trauma room doctor I was talking to, is the psychological trauma. He was telling me that New Yorkers who were near ground zero, and even some of those who weren't, who just witnessed this, listening to us on the radio, watching on TV, he says may find themselves overwhelmed by the enormity of this tragedy, that it will begin sinking in over the next few days. He said if it's just generalized anxiety and nervousness and lack of sleep, call your physician. But if it's something more serious, then get yourself into a hospital. There are psychiatrists, mental health experts here to treat people. As far as raw numbers from here, 306...
John, I'm going to cut you short because we have Mayor Giuliani on the live line. Good morning, Your Honor. We saw you on ABC a short time ago, and you finally had some numbers regarding loss of life among uniformed service personnel. Could you repeat that information for us, please?
Right now, we're looking for about 259 members of the uniformed service, about 202 firefighters, then the rest are New York City police officers and Port Authority police officers. So far, we have 41 fatalities where we've recovered the person and accounted for it. But those numbers are just the very beginning of the recovery effort.
You indicated also that rescue workers were in contact with one and possibly two individuals still buried in the rubble. What can you tell us about that?
Well, they recovered two people. There was at least a third person with those two people that they recovered, and they are in voice communication with that person right now, and in the process of trying to extricate him. And at least that's the one that's the most active right now. We also have reports of cell phone calls from inside the debris. Whether that's the same situation or other situations, we're tracking that down right now.
Okay, well, let's hope that it's additional people.
We have to hope all day as we go through this recovery effort that we're going to be able to save some lives. I mean, that's hope, and that's the way in which we focus these efforts. So let's keep praying and hoping that that's the case.
Okay, Mayor Giuliani, people in New York City, some will not be able to get to work today. It looks like a goodly many will not be able to and should not go to work today. What advice can you give people on how to most constructively spend their time today?
I would say with your family and reflecting on what happened, and if you can help and support some of the people that are sustaining losses, that would be enormously helpful. I people realize what happens here. They're going to see that many people are affected. Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll let you go about your business, Mayor Giuliani, and it is substantial business indeed. We were talking to 1010 Wins newsman John Montone. He was down at St. Vincent's Hospital and let us know that, unfortunately, they had not taken anyone in there since last night, but rescue efforts are underway in the rubble. They are in communication with at least a few people, possibly, who are buried, and hopefully they will be transported to St. Vincent's sometime today in savable condition. Wins News Time, 7:28. In addition to the massive problems with transportation this morning, there are some elements of the transportation system open, but quite a few are not open. There are many cancellations, including New York City public and parochial schools. They're closed today. 1010 Wins newsman Brian Carey is with us and has a list of some of the other closings. Brian?
Well, the state and federal courts and borough courts, employees there should stay home today unless contacted, and jurors should not report for jury duty. The Empire State Building, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and all businesses below 14th Street in Manhattan, including Wall Street, the New York Stock Exchange, the NASDAQ, and the Amex, and the New York headquarters of AXA Financial closed today. Borough of Manhattan Community College on Chambers Street is closed. All other CUNY schools are open today. The Brooklyn Center of Long Island University has canceled classes. All non-essential employees at LU Brooklyn being told to stay home. St. John's University canceling all classes and all offices there closed except for the essential staff. You know who you are. are. All facilities of the New York Public Library are closed. The Bank Street Graduate School, Cope Institute, Fashion Institute of Technology, Juilliard School, all closed. In Westchester, the Halland School is closed. In New Jersey, the Young School and Elementary, Bogota Schools, the Secaucus District, Bayonne Schools, Weehawken Schools, the Jersey City District, Passaic Catholic Regional, the A. Harry Moore School, New Jersey City University, Rutgers Newark, Rutgers New Brunswick, Rutgers Technical Training Programs, and Ramapo College all closed today. Lee.
Winds news time 7:30 at 63 degrees and clear in New York. We'll be going up to 78 today in Midtown. We'll get you another check of traffic and transit in just 1 minute. There are many places you really shouldn't go today in and around New York City. This is having a rather disastrous effect on the world of sports and entertainment as well. A secondary concern, but a concern nevertheless. And 1010 Winds newsman Steve Torrey has more on that.
Before yesterday's tragedy, baseball's focus was on the playoff races and Barry Bonds' pursuit of Mark McGwire's single-season home run record. All of that is on hold today. An entire day's schedule postponed yesterday. And other than work stoppages, it's the first time that's happened since the death of President Roosevelt in 1945. The Yankees have already postponed tonight's game with the White Sox in the Bronx. The White Sox plan to take a bus out of the city today and head for Cleveland, which likely means more games will be wiped out. The Mets, who were scheduled to play the Pirates in Pittsburgh, were forced out of their hotel, which was near a federal building, and as a security precaution, moving to one in the suburbs. College football will decide today whether to play this weekend, and the NFL, which to this day regrets playing on the weekend following the assassination of President Kennedy in 1963, expected to make a decision on this weekend's game within the next day or so. The NHL's Los Angeles Kings mourning the deaths of two employees today. Director of Pro Scouting Ace Bailey and Mark Bavis, another scout with the club, were among those on the United Airlines flight from Boston, the second plane to crash into the World Trade Center. Steve Torrey, 1010 Winds News.
Winds news time 7:31. Your traffic options limited this morning, but not non-existent. Let's find out what works and what doesn't with traffic and transit on the ones. Here's Pete Torriello.
Pretty much limited to mass transit, Lee, with the Hudson and East River bridges and tunnels all around the map shut down coming into Manhattan until further notice. Also, the FDR Drive and the West Side Highway are shut down uptown and downtown bound from 96th Street all the way down to the Battery. The inbound Gowanus is shut down at Fort Hamilton Parkway, and the southbound Henry Hudson Parkway is closed at 232nd Street. We have the Tappan Zee Bridge open in both directions, but as you could imagine, with that being one of the only bridges anywhere near Manhattan that's open, it is very, very congested coming in from Rockland County over to the Westchester side, and then you're going to have a lot of traffic obviously winding its way down toward the city, perhaps along the Hutchinson River Parkway, the New England Thruway. Again, remember the southbound Henry Hudson is shut down at 232nd Street. Down at the Verrazano Bridge, the Staten Island bound lanes are open on both levels. The Brooklyn bound upper level is still shut down, but the lower level is open going to Brooklyn, and then when you get off the Verrazano, you have to exit either to the Belt Parkway or Fort Hamilton Parkway. Coming in from Nassau County, they have closed the westbound LIE, the Northern Parkway, and the Southern Parkway at the Queens line. Of course, all domestic flights leaving Newark JFK LaGuardia are suspended at least until noon today. City subways, the 1 and 2 are operating from the Bronx down to 34th Street. The number 1 is local only out of Van Cortlandt Park, 242nd Street down to 34th Street. Your number 2 is express only down to 34th Street. And the number 2 shuttle is operating from Flatbush Avenue to Atlantic Avenue in Brooklyn. The number 3 line is suspended. The 4s are running from Woodlawn in the Bronx down to New Lots Avenue, skipping Union Square, Borough Hall. The number 5s are running from Dyer Avenue down to Flatbush Avenue, but again skipping Union Square, Borough Hall. The number 6 is running all the way down to Bleecker Street, and then it stops there. Your F trains are running normally both ways, the B, D, and Q. And W trains have no service out of Canal Street. Path trains are operating every 5 minutes on the Hoboken and Newark lines to 33rd Street, making all stops both ways. Street cleaning regulations, of course, are suspended, and we'll have more coming up very shortly. Lee?
Winds news time 7:33. This is continuous live coverage of what's come to be called the attack on America. Two big questions this morning. Who did it and what's next? 1010 Winds newsman James Sparity in the newsroom this morning with some of that information. James?
Well, Lee, President Bush vows to avenge what he calls acts of mass murder on American soil. Mr. Bush has invited congressional leaders to a meeting at the White House this morning. Much of the speculation over yesterday's horrific attacks on New York and Washington centering on on terrorist mastermind Osama bin Laden. CNN's Nick Robertson reports that bin Laden's host country, Afghanistan, is now trying to distance itself from what happened.
Last night, of course, the Taliban moving very swiftly. Foreign Minister Wakil Ahmed Mutawakil talking to journalists saying that they were not responsible, Afghanistan was not responsible, that they condemned terrorism in all its forms, and they said that Osama bin Laden couldn't be responsible for what had happened. Mullah Omar, the spiritual leader of the country, issuing a statement indicative of the apprehension that possibly Afghanistan could be a place where retribution might be sought. But certainly Mullah Omar's statement, Osama bin Laden, he said, could not be responsible. This type of terrorism, he said, was too great for one man.
Many experts beg to differ, however, suggesting that Osama bin Laden is virtually the only terrorist on the world stage who could have orchestrated the coordinated hijackings and crashes. Brian Jenkins, a terrorism expert with the RAND Corporation, accepts that premise, but says the search may turn up additional co-conspirators.
We may find that this particular action involved actors from several different sources.
The top Republican on the Senate Intelligence Committee, Richard Shelby of Alabama, says the U.S. was caught completely off guard.
This obviously was a failure of great dimension. We had no specific warning of the United States being attacked, although people have alluded to that before. We've got to do better. We must do better.
Overseas, CNN's Christiane Amanpour reports from London that U.S. allies are on high alert.
Here in Britain, there has been heightened security, not only at the airports where I flew in today, where there are policemen with submachine guns at the entrances to the airport. There are no planes allowed to fly over central London, but also in other areas of government buildings, there is a heightened state of alert, as there are in many other capitals. It is increasingly jittery. We've heard stories and reports of hoaxes, fake bomb alerts, and indeed Downing Street, the Prime Minister's residence here in Britain, was evacuated of all the journalists shortly before their national security meeting, and no reason was given for that.
Meanwhile, back at home, the word is the fire at the Pentagon is now under control, but a fire chief says the number of people killed there could hit 800. He says he's hoping they find more survivors, but notes no sounds have been heard coming from within the rubble. Non-stop coverage of the terrorist attacks in New York and Washington continues with 1010 Wins News anchor Lee Harris.
All right, the effects of this are wide-ranging. Morgan Stanley Dean Witter and Company, which had been the World Trade Center's largest tenant, says it has limited information as to the fate of its employees who were working there. The company said on its website that the key focus and concern are for the well-being and safety of Morgan Stanley employees. Morgan Stanley says it had about 3,500 workers stationed at the World Trade Center. There's late word from the rescue site that 5 people have been pulled alive from the rubble. 5 people pulled alive from the rubble. 1010's newsman Al Jones is there, and he will update us on that in a very few moments. The toppling of the Twin Towers disrupted phone service in the metro area. From Maine to Georgia yesterday, the Trade Center had housed equipment and antennas that transmitted millions of calls every day. The damage put an unprecedented volume of traffic into the system and overwhelmed an already strained communication system. Verizon and Sprint had facilities destroyed in those attacks. Lower Manhattan, as you've heard many times now, is essentially closed down to all but emergency service personnel, but there are people who live there. They're trying to live there this morning anyway, as we hear from 1010 Wins reporter Alice Stockton-Racine.
The people living near what once was the Twin Towers have a question.
When are they going to put the power on back down here for people who live? They're going to open up the stock exchange tomorrow, but they need electricity. There's no power down here.
Mark woke up this morning wishing he had a bad dream, but then all the horrible memories came flooding back.
The second plane, the building's going down, people going out windows.
So people going out windows?
Yeah. Yeah, that was rough.
The shirt Mark's wearing sums up his feelings.
End of the world.
Why are you wearing it?
I don't know. It just fit itself that way.
Alex Stockton Rossini, 1010 Wins in Lower Manhattan.
Well, it may seem that way, but let's hope that's a bit of an exaggeration anyway. We have late-breaking word from the rescue site that 5 people have been pulled alive from the rubble. That is better than we were expecting at some points. It had been quite a while since anyone had been brought to St. Vincent. Nobody had been brought there since last night, so hope was fading, and this may be cause for renewed hope. We did get some hard numbers from Mayor Giuliani a short time ago. He was live here on 1010 Wins. He told us that 250 259 uniformed service personnel, 202 firefighters among them are missing, possibly dead, and there were 41 known dead among that number. That's the latest we have so far. Obviously, those numbers expected to rise, but right now, a little good news having come our way regarding a rescue at the World Trade Center, and we'll be going there live in a few moments with 1010 Wins newsman Al Jones. If you want to mail a letter today, the post office says it will not be picking them up from the blue post office boxes on street corners. You can take your letter, however, to a post office. It'll be handled there, and the post office will attempt to make deliveries to any buildings to which it can gain access, and that leaves out most of lower Manhattan. For the latest news, anytime, anywhere, set a news button on your car radio to 1010 Wins, New York City's most listened to radio station. Portions written by Tom Offer.
Today, our nation saw evil, the very worst of human nature.
I can't find anybody from 5 rescues and 7 squads. And it's just, it's a devastating thing. I don't know. Well, the fire department will recover, but I don't know how.
I would like to tell you good morning, as we do every day at this time, but it's really not the case. The best we can hope for is that today will be better than yesterday. Just about anything would be. New York and the nation are waking up to a nightmare. Some are calling, without any risk of exaggeration, the worst tragedy ever to befall this country. We still don't have a real sense of the death toll, other than it is enormous. There's massive disruption in the city, especially in lower Manhattan. Let's get the major points in traffic and transit on the ones. Here's Pete Torriello.
Right, we're getting an update here on the subways now, Lee. The R trains are running Brooklyn service only from 95th Street down to Court Street, and the N train is also available. Is that correct, Joan?
From Astoria to 34th.
Astoria in Queens to 34th Street in Manhattan.
And in Stillwell from Court Street in Brooklyn.
Stillwell to Court. Okay, thank you very much. As you can see, this information is coming in literally here as we're on the air. Hudson and East River bridges and tunnels are closed coming into Manhattan. The Lincoln and the Holland tunnels are shut down in both directions. The Tappan Zee Bridge is open both ways, and we are seeing some extremely heavy traffic coming over from Rockland County. In New Jersey, a number of roads are still shut down, including eastbound Route 3 at the 495 Viaduct. They have also shut down the Staten Island-bound lanes of the Goethals, the Bayonne Bridge, and the Outer Bridge crossing. Mass transit really is the best way to get around, and only if you positively have to come into the city. Jersey Transit, the Long Island Railroad, and Metro North say that they are trying to provide normal service this morning. You can't get up the Gowanus. That is closed inbound at Fort Hamilton Parkway. Coming down the Henry Hudson, everything is shut down southbound at 232nd Street, and also coming in from Nassau County, the LIE, the northern and southern parkways westbound are shut down at the city line. Street cleaning regulations remain suspended, and of course airports still shut down coast to coast. Lee?
All right, Pete, we're getting what passes for some good news this morning. It comes from the rescue scene at what had been the World Trade Center. 1010 Wins newsman Al Jones is there. And Al, I understand we've had some rescues.
Yeah, they did actually find people overnight and early this morning. They made some headway, finding at least 6, maybe 7. I'm going to let firefighter Bill Duty kind of break it down for us.
From what I understand, they found a fire crew last night that was stuck in a void. I think it was 5 or 6 guys they took out, and there were 2 Port Authority cops that they used a cell phone. They got in touch with someone. Somehow they found them and got them out.
So the 2 fellows with the cell phone were found, and at least 5 firefighters were found, and he thought these were members of Rescue 5 that had been missing. So some good news come out of the rubble. Also, one of the trauma surgeons here told me they pulled a 50-year-old man out a little while ago who was in bad shape but was talking and seemed coherent. But I guess that's the good news. Obviously, the stuff that kind of brings us all in perspective is that if you count 8, 9, 10 people pulled out overnight, you're still missing thousands. Not just the 200 and odd service people who are missing, but the thousands of office workers who are unaccounted for. The search continues, obviously. They're continuing with dogs and with probes, the stuff that you see at earthquake sites around the world. That's the way they're going about this. It's about a 5-story stack of debris. And I say stack because the steel girders that used to hold up the ceilings, that used to form the stories, have just pancaked down. And you can see people climbing up on the sides of it. They're still pouring water on some spots that are still hot. So most of the heavy equipment still stands at the already. I mean, there might be 100 dump trucks here just lined up, strung out on all these streets, waiting to haul away debris. There's payloaders, there's forklifts, there's men with chainsaws, men with those concrete saws, jackhammers, everything. But a lot of that is kind of on hold because right now they don't want to disturb the rubble. They're poking around, hoping to find more survivors buried inside. Lee?
And again, 6 rescued in the overnight hours.
Yeah, again, at least 6 pulled out alive, at least 6, maybe 7, maybe 8. Good news, it is, but we still have a lot to go.
All right, well, let's hope there will be more. 1010 Wins newsman John Montone is at St. Vincent's Hospital where many of the walking wounded and otherwise wounded were taken. John, are they bringing these rescued victims to the hospital as far as you know?
No, they haven't, Lee. In fact, I was going to say that one of the real stark symbols of how devastating this terrorist attack was is just to look here for hours upon hours of these empty triage centers all night and into the morning. Doctors and nurses, 3 times the normal staff, have been here waiting for victims who just never arrive. Dr. Richard Westfall, who's the associate director of the trauma center, told me they will continue to wait and hope. They will never give up the hope that there are survivors. And he was comparing this to Oklahoma City and what happened there, saying that 24 hours later, they had people...
And we've been prepared and are awaiting victims from the site as well. We are, as I think Mayor Giuliani has said over and over, we are very hopeful, we are prepared, and we are expecting to work very hard to resuscitate victims as they're brought here and brought to other hospitals.
One of his colleagues, perhaps speaking more realistically about this grim situation, said if there are miraculous rescues, and so far this wait, of course, has been in vain. We do have some numbers here, and as I give them to you, just to remind you as we repeat these numbers, they can sound like empty statistics at times, but these were, in some case, and are in many of the cases, living, breathing human beings. More than 360 people were brought here. Fortunately, most of them were suffering from the smoke and the dust inhalation. They were in the area of the Trade Center yesterday, but 50 did have major trauma type injuries, broken bones, organ problems. 4 people who were brought here died, 2 en route to the hospital, cardiac arrest. And since last night, since 9 o'clock last night, not a single additional patient has been brought here. But as I mentioned before, the triage units are ready. They are just hoping against hope for some influx of ambulances carrying people who somehow survived this horrible crash. Lee?
Well, it's been about 22 hours now since the World Trade Center towers collapsed, so indeed it would be miraculous to find more. But as you heard a few moments ago, 6 people have been pulled out alive in recent hours. So many people remain unaccounted for. Some, indeed, may have lost their lives. Others may be, as we heard from one woman, tied up at the Goethals Bridge. Numbers have been set up to help loved ones locate other loved ones. And 1010 Wins newsman Brian Carey has collected those hotline numbers. He's here with us now. Brian?
Well, of course, Lee, as you say, the shock over what happened is compounded with the not knowing for the families and friends of the thousands who worked at the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center and its surrounding businesses. An estimated 50,000 people alone worked in the 2 buildings, and that's not counting the people who passed through the area each morning. If you're looking for a lost loved one, the NYPD has set up 2 numbers, 1-866-856-4167. That's 866-856-4167 or 212-741-4626, 212-741-4626. There's a hotline for information on firefighters and EMS personnel specifically. That number, 718-999-2541. Again, 718-999-2541. The general number for questions in New York City is 212-560-2730. 212-560-2730. American Airlines passenger information, 1-800-245-0999, 800-245-0999. United Airlines passenger information, 1-800-932-8555. The American Red Cross is providing several shelters in New York City. At each of those shelters, a number of services being offered. Trained disaster mental health workers will be there to, of course, tend to the emotional grief. Food, water, blankets are being provided, and registered nurses are there as well. Red Cross spokesperson Jamie Drogan.
At this point, we have about 120 registered clients, and we anticipate that there are obviously a number of more coming in. We also had disaster mental health workers in the streets in the aftermath, talking with people and coping with people. And in terms of providing the meals at the mobile units, we anticipate in the next couple of days we'll be serving approximately 10,000 meals. So we're out there, and this is, of course, in the greater New York area and then throughout the country. The Red Cross is there tending to needs of people everywhere.
And those shelter locations are in Manhattan, Bayard Rustin High School, 351 West 18th Street, Seward Park High, 350 Grand Street, Washington Irving High School, 40 Irving Place, Fashion Industry High School, 225 West 24th Street, Chelsea High, 131 6th Avenue, Norman Thomas High School, 111 East 33rd Street, City School, 16 Clarkson Street, JHS, 2211 Columbia Street. On Staten Island, Curtis High, 105 Hamilton Avenue, and in Brooklyn, Westinghouse High School, 105 Johnson Street. The Red Cross's biggest needs, blood, money, and prayer. To give blood, you can call 800-GIVE-BLOOD. You'll be given the name of specific blood center locations. As for donating money, you should call 1-800-HELP-NOW. Remember, all of the services the Red Cross provides are provided for by volunteers. Non-stop coverage of the terrorist attacks on New York and Washington continues with Lee Harris.
All right, Brian, and we do have a list of the shelters and also the numbers you gave out on our website. We have stripped it down to make it accessible to more people. You may have some trouble getting in there, but you can keep trying. And again, we do have a list of the shelters and where they're located, as well as the phone numbers you can call for information on missing loved ones. WINS News Time, 7:51. Very limited transit and traffic options this morning. Here's Pete Torriello with traffic and transit on the ones.
Hudson East River bridges and tunnels are, of course, off limits coming into Manhattan. They are closed. Also, the Harlem River crossings that go from the Bronx into Manhattan are closed. All of them are open going back into the Bronx, but not into Manhattan. The southbound Henry Hudson Parkway is shut down at 232nd Street. In Brooklyn, the inbound Gowanus Expressway is closed at Fort Hamilton Parkway. Coming in from Nassau County, the westbound lanes of the Long Island Expressway, the Northern and Southern State Parkways are closed at the city line. And in Manhattan, the West Side Highway, the FDR Drive shut down both ways from 96th Street all the way down to the Battery, and all streets are closed from 14th Street on down. New Jersey Transit, Metro North, Long Island Railroad are running normal service. PATH trains are running every 5 minutes. The latest update here from the subways, the TA says the R trains are running Brooklyn service only between 95th Street and Court Street, and it's a split deal on the N train running from Astoria through 34th Street and between Stillwell Avenue and Court Street. The street cleaning regulations are suspended on a citywide basis on the Jersey side. Eastbound Route 3 remains shut down at the 495 viaduct with traffic diverted over to Tunley Avenue. Northbound 1 and 9 was shut down beneath the covered roadway in Jersey City, and eastbound 80, 95, 4, and 46, as well as the New Jersey Turnpike, have no access to the George Washington Bridge. We'll have more shadow traffic coming up shortly on 1010 WINS.
And if you do try to get through on any of those blocked off routes, you could find yourself facing some unintended consequences. We had on the line not too long ago a woman who had been stranded at the Goethals Bridge since 4 p.m. yesterday with no prospect of getting wherever it was she wanted to go. Mayor Giuliani has been doing what he can to calm the city's populace. Speaking from the Emergency Management Center, he called in here about 20 minutes ago and said the best use of your time today, if you're not involved in the emergency services of one sort or another, may be to spend the day with your family and helping those who are in need. He also passed along this yesterday. He noted that the city does have a substantial Palestinian population, and he had this advice for anyone who might be thinking about taking their anger out on members of that population.
Hatred, prejudice, anger, and irrational reaction to things is what caused this terrible tragedy. And people of the city of New York should act differently. We should act bravely. We should act in a tolerant way. We should go about our business, and we should show these people that they can't stop us, and they can't.
Of course, the question of who is responsible remains unanswered, but some leads are being developed. And for information on that, let's go to 1010 WINS newsman James Sparity.
Well, a day after the worst ever terrorist attacks on U.S. soil, investigators are furiously combing through the evidence. Newsman Jim Hickey has the latest.
The hijackers who commandeered at least one of the 4 airplanes used in the attacks apparently smuggled knife-like objects aboard. The Boston Herald reports they eluded security by embedding the blades in plastic. The newspaper says after takeoff, the hijackers began killing flight attendants with the weapons. That concurs with reports that some passengers made panic cell phone calls from the planes before they died in the attacks.
At the Pentagon this morning, correspondent Barbara Starr reports rescuers are sifting through the rubble, hoping to find survivors.
The smell of smoke, jet fuel, and gas is still rising from the Pentagon. The entire area is deserted of civilian and military employees, but dozens of emergency personnel are stationed outside the building, doing triage on the wounded and searching for the dead.
At the White House, CNN's John King tells us officials may know who's responsible for the attacks.
The White House has a usual suspect list that begins because of the sophistication of these attacks. 4 planes hijacked at the same time. Obviously, some of the people aboard those planes being able to pilot them. The White House saying all signs point to, and we know from briefings given by senior administration officials to key members of Congress, they are saying that they believe that they are collecting credible evidence pointing to associates and affiliates of Osama bin Laden. They also caution us that they want to continue this investigation.
Despite vows from officials that the terrorists would not change the way the government operates, clearly the attacks are having at least some effect. Secretary of State Colin Powell says U.S. embassies all over the world are closing their doors as a safety precaution.
We have given discretion to all of our ambassadors to close down or temporarily suspend operations based on their judgment of the threat level. 25% of our embassies overseas are currently shut down or have suspended operations, but there are no direct threats yet to any of those embassies. It's precautionary in nature.
Among the embassy shut down, those in the Middle East, where former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak called for America to lead the international community in defeating terrorism.
I believe that the American president should lead and will lead the whole world, the UK, the Europeans, Russia. Putin will cooperate. I'm confident. He experienced the price of terror on his own skin. The Australians, New Zealand, Israel, of course. The whole world should focus an effort on putting an end to it.
Non-stop coverage of the terrorist attacks on New York and Washington continues with 1010 WINS news anchor Lee Harris.
WINS News Time, 7:56. We did get a little good news in the past hour from the rescue site at what had been the World Trade Center, and that is that 6 people had been pulled alive from the rubble in the past few hours. No word yet on their conditions or where they've been taken. But, of course, it being now almost 22 hours or more than 22 hours since the World Trade Center towers collapsed, it is a miracle to find anyone alive. Mayor Giuliani has indicated that there are 259 uniformed service personnel either dead or missing at this time, among them 202 firefighters. And, of course, these numbers are expected to get worse, not better, as digging through the rubble continues. WINS News Time, 7:57. Wall Street and everything south of 14th Street of a commercial nature closed today, but we do have with us 1010 WINS Wall Street correspondent Larry Kopsky. And obviously, Larry, this is not good for the nation's economy or the economy of the world.
Well, the economic impact of yesterday's reign of terror is only starting to be felt. MarketWatch.com's chief economist, Dr. Erwin Kellner, is only one of many experts predicting a downturn from what was already a precariously low second quarter growth rate. Retailers, airlines, hotels, and insurance companies are likely to take a hit. Security companies, on the other hand, could see their business jump. In the second quarter, the government estimated economic growth at just a 0.2% annual rate, and with economists now saying that we are going to see at least a temporary downturn as a result of what has happened, there's not a whole lot of room for error in terms of keeping the economy on a positive path. It'll be tomorrow at the earliest before U.S. investors get a chance to react to yesterday's devastation, and if overseas markets are any indication, that reaction will be negative. London markets were already open when the attacks took place, and the Financial Times 100 index quickly tumbled to close at its lowest level all year. It stabilized this morning, and as of about 10 minutes ago, the FT 100 was up about 24 points or so. In Tokyo, the Nikkei index tumbled 690 points overnight, falling below 10,000 for the first time in about 7 years. Once again, Wall Street closed today, as you've been hearing on 1010 WINS. They're talking about resuming trading tomorrow. I think that probably remains to be seen.
Now, there's been some activity on the oil front as well, and some reports of price gouging.
Yeah, there was a report out of Kansas City, I think, that someone was selling unleaded gas at $5 a gallon, despite the fact that the oil companies were asking their retailers to show restraint to keep prices stable. On the other hand, as I was taking my long walk yesterday from the financial district up here to Midtown, the delis and fruit stands were selling bottles of water for the typical $1. So where there is some price gouging some places here in New York, it looks like New Yorkers were just looking to help out.
All right, thanks, Larry. Let's take a quick check of the 1010 Winds AccuWeather forecast. There is weather today. Sunny today, although probably not pleasant. High 78. It'll be mainly clear tonight. Low 52 in some suburbs, 62 Midtown. Tomorrow, sunshine, some clouds. There will be a shower and a thunderstorm late tomorrow into early Friday with a high of 80. 61 degrees, clear skies over New York. We're headed up to 78 in Midtown. This is your all-news station, 1010 Winds, WINS New York, and Infinity Broadcasting